Hello YouTube! Today I'm on the banks of the mighty Missouri River, and when Lewis and Clark first set out, they stayed a couple of nights on a bluff across the way, and then in 1808 William Clark returned here with a group of soldiers and met up with another command, and they built Fort Osage. So let's go take a look, a little step back in history to that era, shall we? So the fort is built on the original foundations and in the original area. They did not complete it, and that the original fort went out to that white stake right there, which is odd to me to build into that kind of a valley, but it is what it is. So there's a number of blockhouses here, and let's take a step inside this one, and I like that they have a bench to be able to stand up on to shoot, and then they got ways to block the hole, which is a lot of holes they're shooting out of. And you've got low ones on all four sides for a cannon. On the one side is the soldiers' huts, and with the dirt floor, this is probably a more authentic one of the era. Iraq Fair guns. A little more authentic than most of the places that we have visited. And this one, a little bit bigger, a few more troops in here, a wooden floor, a bench for eating. This is the one on a corner, so it ends up having two doors. And in the same building, they've got one set up with a workshop. Although I can't say I admire how this person takes care of their tools. They're just sort of laying all over the place. And at the end is the blacksmith shop. Which again, judging by the rust on that anvil, it doesn't get used a lot. Probably the occasional demonstration, but it's a nice setup. Now, if a soldier had some sort of infraction where they needed discipline, that white post right there, they would have been tied up to it and could have received up to 40 lashes. Now that is the whipping post. It's unusual upper level of a blockhouse. It has the fireplace. I believe that's because this one was manned 24 hours a day, and it did look out over the river. And as you can see, we are on built up on a bluff. I think they said it was about 70 feet down. Very steep, so you're looking at walls that are pushing 100 feet. But because it's up here on the bluff, it's got a good view down the river that way, and another good view when those trees aren't there, down the river that way. So a good defensible position, and here's a view out the other observation port. To get an idea, you're looking down the river that way. There's another blockhouse on the other corner on the edge of the bluff, and of course the fort goes back that way. And this big house here was the factor's house. That was back when the state or the government had factors, they call them, to buy furs, trade for them with the natives, and of course the trappers that came out this way. And later the Santa Fe Trail actually started here, and that was one of the missions that Clark was given, that when they established this, is to start scouting out a route to the southwest. Because remember, the Louisiana Purchase had just been made a few years earlier. This was 1808 when the place was built. So they were looking to expand and build forts on the way to protect the settlers. So now we're inside the factors, and this is where all kinds of trade goods that were manufactured. You could trade a lot of times. Up here was beaver and deer pelts, but you could trade for beads or bells or axes, firearms, blankets. They said pretty much anything that was manufactured and they couldn't make themselves. The first factor of the fort was George Sibley, and as a matter of fact, the town around the fort is now named for him. And this was his living quarters up on the second floor, a room about 20 feet by 14 feet. And he did share this with his clerk, and in his diary he wrote about how he kind of a bachelor's hall. And on May 7th, 1811, sentry badly wounded a man to be from the Iowa, and a Osage Indian promptly dispatched him. And George wrote in his diary, Sans Orwell, chief of the little Osage, had made his way into my sleeping room and stood at my bedside holding the head of the slain Indian in one hand and a blazing torch in the other. That's not how I'd want to wake up. And right outside of his room, across the rest of it, would have been a storage loft where trade goods and hides would have been stored up here waiting for transport up or down the Missouri. And down here on the lower level, you've got a press to press the hides down to make the bales, and big scale there to weigh the bale.
Okay.
So Mr. Sibley had In the morning, he liked his coffee, but he would get it like this, green beans, and then you could dry toast them in a skillet, like this one over here, over the fire, and then grind it with a mortar and pestle.
They won't be able to smell it, but you can.
Oh, you can't smell it, but it smells good, even though I don't like coffee. Okay, Mr. Sibley liked his coffee. He would get it as green beans, and then in a skillet, dry roast it over the fire, and then grind it with a mortar and pestle, and it's all ready to brew up for those who want their cup of coffee. I would think you'd probably get woken up just by the fact that you had to do all that work just to get your coffee. So the other thing that's cooking is a onion soup, and according to Mr. Sibley's diary, in the evenings he would have hominy, and they aren't sure whether it's hominy or grits, which are basically the same thing, just how fine you grind it, and they don't know whether he had it as a savory thing like we'd think for a dinner or a sweet thing. So down here on the lowest level is the powder magazine, which is really weird to have a powder magazine in a building where all the valuable furs and trade goods were. They did use this as a storehouse, and this line denotes where the actual original foundation that for this factory house, and where they built on top of it. Slightly different style blockhouse is, instead of having the little ports that they do have them down below, but they've got big long ones here. They close up or open up and get a good field of fire across the front of the fort and down out that way. And I think that's pretty much, we've seen everything around the fort. And I'm going to go check out the museum. Now down in the basement of the Welcome Center, they got an interesting exhibit, tells a lot of the history of the area, as well as about Lewis and Clark, and there are some artifacts here. And exhibits of the Native American life at the time. We'll get an idea of how the factory where we were. I mean, here's the general store, dining room, that upper storage room, and Sibley's bedroom. And then the basement where the furs were pressed. This is where they had the kitchen, but in this particular case, it was the kitchen, and then the storage and the powder magazine down below. And when they did an archaeological dig, they actually did find this padlock, the nails, these window panes, and this drawer pull were found in what remained of the factory. They've got on display probably the most complete dugout canoe that I've run across. The shop in the end, this is sometime between 1700 and 1850. It says walnut recovered from the bank of the Blue River in 92. It could have been used by American Indians. It could have been used by trappers, but it was carved using metal tools. I think that's going to end my visit here to Fort Osage, and it's in Sibley, Missouri, right on the Missouri River. It's a pretty interesting place. It's $8 for an adult, $4 for children, or those of us in our second childhood and seniors. So well worth it. A lot of interesting history in this spot. So I'm going to get on the road, see what else I can find. See you later, YouTube.